presented by Realm of the Mist Entertainment. Listener discretion is advised.
All right. Everyone, welcome back to Realm of the Mist presents It Had to Be Said with Venus. It has been so long since we've done one of these, but we're back and we're ready to have some fun. We're here with my co-host, Christopher Stolle.
What's up, guys? Yeah, I'm back for another one.
Yeah, and my very special guest host, Mr. Bob Sinclair. He's going to tell you a bit about himself.
That'd be Doctor. Anyway, I'm a research scientist, and I've been following COVID-19 since the Chinese first announced it in December. I actually believe that they were lying. It was probably October or earlier when they had their first cases. I was one of these people who liked doing research and was stupid enough to go to school for 12 years after high school. But I respect intelligent people, and Venus and I, for example, often disagree with one another on various issues, but she's bright as hell, and I enjoy our conversations. I'm kind of an independent person, and so I borrow from the center left and center right, but I stay far away from Antifa and neo-Nazis. There.
That seems about accurate. I can't speak for Venus, but myself, I always call myself right of center. Like there are liberal things that I do agree with and ideals that fit my lifestyle, but more often than not, I usually classify as a conservative, just not a alt-right conservative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'd be
I used to be more liberal. Like a long time ago, I used to be a lot more liberal, but then like kind of being more liberal and being around liberal people, I realized how much I was not liberal.
I'm just probably, you see, in the U.S. and Canada, centrists mean completely different things, okay? A centrist in Canada is kind of right in the middle, and I might be just a slightly bit left of center, but they still support things like, universal health care, which, in the States reeks of socialism. And a centrist in the States would support the military-industrial complex, and a centrist in Canada would not. So there are differences in using those terms cross-border.
Well, I think
Christopher is from the States, so
yeah, I think one of the biggest ideals, and especially in the United States, thanks to President Trump being elected, it brought out a lot of the bad on both sides of the aisle, and unfortunately, it's pretty much eliminated the centrists or moderates, if you will, because of the fact that like nowadays it's either you're conservative or you're liberal, and it doesn't matter where you fit into that spectrum. They automatically say, well, if you're a conservative, you're automatically alt-right. You're automatically a neo-Nazi. You're automatically a white supremacist or racist or whatever. And the same for the liberals. If you're
a socialist, you're a communist.
You're a socialist. You're a communist. You're all you want is free shit. Don't care where it comes from. Like all that stuff. It's exhausting to even try to keep up with.
Well, this is it's not quite as bad in Canada, but it's still a bimodal distribution. Yours is bigger. You got a lot of people on the left, you got a lot of people on the right, and there's nobody in between. And we're seeing the same sort of thing in Canada. And I'm hoping that the Gen Z people, or Gen Z, since we're in the States, that the Gen Z people fill in the middle, because the millennials haven't. So,
right.
And so then we get a normal distribution again, and we could have some people that are realistic, because the problem with having these bimodal distributions is that people don't talk to each other. And if you don't talk to each other, you're not going to solve problems.
That's exactly it. And I think especially for the topic of conversation that we're about to have today, you can't have I was about to use the word bipartisan point of view, but I don't think that's the correct term. You can't have polarizing points of view with this because it is affecting everybody. So we need to put aside our political points of view and concentrate on the matter at hand and what's best for everybody to make this go away.
Well, see, I don't know. You people probably don't pay attention to a great deal of the interaction between Canada and the US, because in the grand scheme of the world, Canada's kind of meaningless. But Canada and Australia simultaneously announced that we weren't sending anybody to the Olympics, and the next day the Olympics was canceled. So small countries can have big effects. However, what your president did yesterday was reprehensible, okay? He said 3M, you can't ship any more N95 masks to Canada. And 3M pushed back and said, excuse me, no. And so somebody needs to remind the president that we're your biggest trading partner. And might want to remind the president that when Katrina hit, we sent people down to deal with, like, we sent for free. We sent down people to deal with electricity, with rebuilding levees and dams. 9/11, we brought in all the planes from that couldn't land in the US and housed people in Canada and took care of them. We sent first responders to 9/11. We got involved with your silly war in Afghanistan, and our guys are dying over there beside your guys. And he's more than willing to send masks to China because he likes despots like Duarte and Xi and Kim and Putin, but he likes to alienate his allies. Plus, on top of this all, we got, probably 1,000 nurses that are working, that live in Canada and go back between the border from Windsor to Detroit and Fort Erie to Buffalo. We might just suggest to them not to go. And the next time that the US wants aid from Canada, we sent firefighters down to deal with the wildfires in California last year too. Maybe we might not be so nice in the future.
I don't know.
Canada is a very giving country.
I was about to say, I think it's kind of in your nature. It's kind of in your nature to be. You give too much.
We're too nice to a fault. Yeah.
Yes, but you know what? There gets to be a point where you've been trodden on so long that you say, guess what? Ain't happening anymore.
Well, look, I will
maybe
say...
if Trudeau grow a sack and then maybe he had the balls to do that, but I don't know. Trudeau's a little bit of a pansy, so...
Well, he is, although he did threaten Trump yesterday with the nurses. He said, well, just keep them home. So, yeah, I don't know if he'll pull through or not. Who knows?
Well, see,
but here's a more important issue.
Okay.
Is I've been in the background advising. I'm a member of this group of international scientists who've been following this COVID-19 stuff, and I've been behind the scenes advising the federal government, because the people of the provincial government don't like me very much. Provinces like a state. And about what our response should be. And we got our ducks in a row, not as quickly as I would have liked, but they adopted and implemented everything that I suggested. And the problem in the US right now is that you guys are competing states are competing for this and that, and FEMA's trying to get their fingers in the pie and make money. And this ain't the time to be doing that. There's got to be cooperation. And, Cuomo was right the other day. He said, look, we got to contend with our hotspot. And as soon as we're done, we're going to help everybody else. And this is not a partisan issue. You're right. You're absolutely right about it. And the way that, these mortality rate numbers are just stupid, okay? Because when you look at it, it's really easy to count dead people, right?
Right.
And I'll give you, the sort of simple, they try and put in recovered and this and that, but let's just look at it simply. Is you take the number of dead people, you divide it by the number of positive cases, you multiply it by 100, and you come out with like a mortality rate, okay? Percentage mortality. But the problem is that the denominator makes no sense, because if the epidemiologists are right and between 50 to 70% of the population is going to be infected, instead of, like, you guys are sitting at almost 3% right now. Well, instead of dividing by the number of positive cases, you divide by 70% of the population of the United States, that mortality rate drops way down, right?
Right.
And then I think a more objective measure, one that makes more sense intuitively to me, is we can count dead bodies pretty well. We also have a really good handle on the populations of various countries, okay? So take the number of dead people, divide it by the population of the country, multiply it by 100, and that's your percentage per capita death rate. Now, that's a real easy one to understand, right? Per capita death rate. And the numbers are objective. Right now, you guys are 30 times our per capita death rate. And that I would attribute to absolute lack of planning, lack of preparation. There's only 2 states that have done anything right. The post-apocalyptic states that are going to exist are California and Washington, because they got on it, and they got on it fast.
Well, I think you're right, but with talking to an expert, and I mean, every one of the shows here at Realm of the Mist have done a lot of coverage on the COVID-19, whether it was something as simple as what are you doing during the quarantine to how do you feel it's affecting, people in small businesses and stuff, especially most of all. Like, we've had those conversations, but I've never had the opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody who's actually researched the virus itself and the responses.
I haven't researched the virus itself. I've researched the impact of the virus. So I'm not a biologist. I'm more of a method stats guy.
Okay. Well, that it still fits to the question I was about to ask. Was somebody who, even with the responses and stuff, within the United States and maybe even Canada, we'll just say North America because it's the same continent. Has the response, even though it's been late, especially here in the United States, is what we're doing the right course of action to contain this? I mean, is the correct answer quarantining and limiting travel and 6 feet away with a mask on, or is there more that we should be doing?
Well, here's my take on it all, because I've been kind of watching this as it moves around the world. First, just as an aside here, Ukraine is going to become, my prediction is Ukraine is going to become the new epicenter in Europe. And we can talk about that later if you want. But anyway, the distancing thing is the number one issue. And now 96% of the US, or a little over 96% of the US, is now has stay-at-home orders. So I mean, stay-at-home orders mean you can go out for essential stuff. Hand washing is of utmost importance, because when you go out, you're going to be touching things. You don't need gloves. Okay, gloves, first of all, give you a false sense of security, and we touch our face a lot during the day. Now, somebody said 2,000 times. That actually came from a movie starring Kate Winslet, okay? Really, we probably touch our faces around 500 times a day. And that, in some senses, that's an evolutionary thing, because we were probably trying to bat flies off of our faces so that we didn't get malaria or yellow fever or typhoid or something and die. But your skin is as effective as, it doesn't get in through your skin. And in fact, even if you got a cut, it doesn't get in through your skin. So when you come home, and you've touched your doorknob to open your door to go into your house, the first thing you do is, put your stuff away that you need to put away, maybe clean the stuff off so that you don't have to worry about touching it again. And then wash your hands with warm water, not hot, warm, for 2 minutes. And you need to keep your social distance even at home with your friends, your spouse, your children, etc., because we know from looking at the cruise line data that some people are test positive and are absolutely asymptomatic, and they would never be tested if it wasn't that they were on these ships. And some people, the effects are so minimal that, like, if you were at home and you got these kind of like minimal effects, you'd never go seek medical help. Well, I think now everybody would, okay, and I think the healthcare system in both countries is getting overwhelmed by people who start having a sneeze and they decide they've got COVID-19, right?
Right.
Now, in terms of that,
flu season.
well, flu season's over in Ontario. But
you know what? We still have 3 feet of snow here in Alberta, so
yeah. It's 15 degrees in Ontario. That by the way is in Celsius, just for the American viewers. So multiply by 2 and add 30, it gives you a close one. So what's that? 60 degrees. Anyway, the economic impact, I'm no economist, okay, but we're all pretty bright people sitting here talking, and the Trump already added $1 trillion to the 2020, basically added $1 trillion to your 2020 deficit. That's projected. Well, that's going to balloon enormously. And in Canada, our projected deficit was about $32 billion. Now, you got to remember that we're 1/10 of the population, kind of, well, but a little more than that, but pretty close, okay? And ours is going to balloon incredibly. And in fact, that's going to happen to every country in the entire world. So we're looking at something like 1929. We're looking at a depression. And but you know what? The world's going to recover. And most of us are going to get through this. Let's put it in the context of this. Spanish flu did I say this already? Spanish flu, 1918 to 1920, killed about 5% of the entire world's population, okay? COVID-19 so far has killed about 0.0007% of the entire world's population. Now, of course, the world's population is a lot more, so it's a lot more. It might be more people, but in the grand scheme of the comparison, there's no comparison. Like COVID-19 just is nowhere near as deadly as the Spanish flu was. Now, here's a big difference, though, between COVID-19 and the flu, is that if you plot number of deaths against age, it's a monstrously negatively skewed distribution. I don't know if you can see my hands. Can you see my hands?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So with the flu, it goes up like this. Old people die. It drops right off, and then it goes to almost zero and tails out. With COVID-19, you get that same big mode up here, and it drops down. But then instead of tailing out right away, it takes its time going down. So what you've got is people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s dying of COVID-19, and you really don't find that with the flu. And that's a big difference. And then people talking about like herd mentality, or pardon me, herd about herd immunity kind of thing. Well, we don't have it, so there's no point in talking about it because it's a novel virus, and so the only way to prevent the herd from getting it is isolating, and hand washing, and quarantining, and staying away from other people.
Now, I have a question that I would love to have answered, and then obviously I'll step off of Venus's show here because it's her show. But one final thing, just with the COVID-19, and it's something that I've speculated it may be something that belongs on one of our older shows, Tinfoil Hat Society. But in your expertise, in your opinion, in what you've seen, is this virus just a natural evolution of something of the flu, or is this a man-made, maybe even weaponized something that got out?
Well, you know what? I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, okay? But I do know that there's a bioweapons lab in Wuhan too. So, I mean, you can make what you want about that. Oh, can I say one more thing about the economic issue, though? Mm-hmm. The insurance companies in the States have come out today, and they're not going to insure people. We pay insurance, businesses pay insurance into this stuff for these sorts of situations, and the insurance companies who take all of our money, and more so in the U.S., don't want to pay out. And in Canada, what's happened is the federal government has put programs into place to bail people out and to help small businesses so that people don't go bankrupt. And banks are deferring mortgage payments interest-free for 6 months. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to pay your mortgage, but eventually, people who are self-employed and do not have an income will be able to get $1,800, $900 every 2 weeks. That's Canadian, so that's like $5 American every 2 weeks. And so we're going to get through this. Those kinds of aid packages haven't been put in place in the U.S. yet. So not only do you have people who are worried about catching COVID-19 and dying, they're also worried about whether they're going to be able to eat. And that's kind of a problem. But you know what? Like I said, the entire world economy is going down the tubes right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
then you don't need a PhD to know
that. No. So overall, when would you expect that this would be pretty much over with? We can go outside. Like this summertime, are we going to be able to go take walks or anything? Or is it still going to be keep you're 6 feet away from people, wear masks, going out?
Well, you know what? The mask issue is one that the data are still out on the masks. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wearing a mask, I suppose. But I mean, what the masks do is they prevent people who are infected and don't know it from spewing droplets around. But so if everybody assumes that they're infected, then I guess everybody'd be wearing masks. But the masks don't prevent you from getting the disease, really. But I'm building a house out on an island in the middle of nowhere, and it was supposed to be done by last August, and it's not. So I've been staying with my 85-year-old mother. Well, I post this on Facebook. Well, I'm going to walk my mom and my dog, and we go out for walks. You can still do that. We go out for walks every day. We just keep, social distance. And the same thing, we'll stop and talk with people, but we stand 6 feet away from them. So, in that sense, you can go out and do things. I don't think this is over. And I don't think it's, people are, Trump's trying to say, he wanted to get people back to work by Easter. I started laughing. I said, this hasn't even peaked yet. And they've canceled in Ontario, they've canceled school until the end of May. They said, and I said, wishful thinking was my response. Mm. I really don't think that, just looking at this stuff, I think we're looking at 2 more months anyway. Oh, nice cat.
Nice pussy.
That's why it may seem like I'm not paying attention. Just for anybody watching, it seems like I'm not paying attention. The reason being is because I was being distracted by the cat. I'm still listening.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's funny. We're all sitting here vaping. This is just an aside. It has nothing to do with this. Is when all this, like, I followed these vaping data because I quit smoking about 3 years ago and started vaping. And you know, when everybody would say vaping is horrible, and it's bad, and it's killing people, and these lung diseases, it's because people were vaping THC that was dissolved in vitamin E acetate that were made in illegal labs. Anybody who's just vaping nicotine or buys it from government outlets, or buys their THC pods from government outlets, will never be harmed. There's no evidence that vaping nicotine does anything bad for you at all.
I mean, outside of what nicotine does, you know. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I searched into that because personally, vaping has helped me quit smoking for a little over a year now, like giving up cigarettes. And of course, I researched in when I heard about the deaths and the people like having extreme lung issues, and
it was all
yeah, it was all third party and back alley creations to get high rather than just, you know, making a cloud. Because, you know, the way I always understood, and I don't understand the chemical compositions of vape as some people do, but from what I understand, it's basically just water vapor. So
it's flavored water vapor coming out. That's it.
Right, and that's what I was trying to describe to people. It's like, how is water vapor hurt you any worse than a humidifier?
In a hot, steamy shower.
Taking a hot shower. It's the exact. If anything, it should be helping to expand and open your lungs, because isn't that what you do with vaporizers and hot steamy showers? I mean, I used to have a vaporizer running when I was a musician, you know, to open up my lung capacity for vocals. I mean,
well, you know, since I've stopped smoking, I've got my blood pressure's gone down mostly, and I can go out and I can run and I don't huff and puff and that sort of thing, which if I was smoking cigarettes, I would not be able to do. You know, so I'd advise, you know, they don't want people. I don't know what it is in the States. And in Ontario, it's under, I think I'm not sure if they made it under 19 to be able to buy any tobacco products. But you know what? Tobacco products are bad. But I got a really strange hypothesis here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Nicotine is as addictive as heroin, okay? It is. This is just fact. We'll take this as fact. And I think that people, the general public who haven't ever smoked and become addicted to nicotine, figure, you know, quitting smoking should be easy, because the side effects, the social side effects of smoking are, yeah, there's secondhand smoke and you smell kind of bad, but you know, but the side effects of heroin addiction are, you know, much more profound socially. So,
right.
So inappropriately, people assume it must be easy to quit nicotine when it's bullshit.
That's it. If you haven't lived in the shoes. Oh, by the way, to answer your question, down here in the States, they've actually gone the opposite way and raised tobacco age limits. Now you have to be 21, which I argue this point with alcohol and tobacco being 21 within the United States, because of the fact that not because of the fact that, like, you know, kids should be allowed to buy tobacco and alcohol products. My argument is, why is it that somebody's considered enough of an adult to be able to elect our world leaders, or our country's leaders, or our municipalities' leaders, old enough to go to war and die for their country, but not old enough to have a beer or smoke a cigarette?
Hey, I can't agree with you more. And actually, you want to know something? This entire thing, this entire raising the age limit to 21 occurred when I was living in beautiful State College, Pennsylvania. And it was under Reagan. And what happened was, he was going to deny traffic funding, or pardon me, infrastructure funding for roads to any states that didn't raise their drinking age to 21. So actually, it might have happened just before I got there, because I think Bush was president when I got there. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Reagan did this. So, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. Now, here's here's my take on it, which is a little bit of a twist from yours, is that because it's like it was 18 in Ontario when I grew up, it's 19 now. But what happens is when it's 19, people start drinking when they're like kind of 16, right? But they get through their drinking phase by the time they go to college, how we say university in Canada, because college in Canada means like vocational school or junior college. Okay. And so they've gone through that phase. And then when I was a grad student at Penn State, you know, people hadn't gone through that stage, so they were going out getting shit-faced drunk all the time, and when because they're, you know, like 19 years old or whatever, and they're getting booze, and like I think it just interfered with their education. And then when I was a professor at Central Michigan University, it was the same thing, right? As they all go to frat parties and drink until, you know, they die of alcohol poisoning, and that doesn't happen in Canada because the kids already got this out of their system. So well, I mean, that's another side of it that I think is important too, and the history behind it is important. And you're right. If you can't, you know, either increase the age to vote. I actually think we should have an IQ test. Is if your IQ isn't over 85, you can't vote.
Mm-hmm. I agree. If you're not a citizen of the country, you can't vote in the country. You have to have a decent amount of understanding, which would fall under intelligence. And I mean, I know that this is where people would classify me as alt-right. But I mean, if you're not a citizen of the country, you're not smart enough to make an informed decision. You shouldn't have that right. If you're not mature enough.
If you're not a citizen, you can't vote anywhere. I hope. I hope that's the case.
Yeah, but unfortunately, down here, the Liberal Party wants to change that. They feel that undocumented immigration should be classified as still citizenship enough to.
So citizenship is on a scale now from extremely not a citizen to extremely a citizen.
Exactly, like not necessarily a citizen, but because they live here, they should have a voice. No.
Yeah, no, I certainly did. I agree with you on that point. I mean, here's a little example though of things that the failure of the American education system, at least in grade school and high school, because I used to ask, you know, I have a friend who was a colleague of mine, and he was blown up in the Vietnam War, and became. After he came back, okay, what happened was he was stateside and he was a drill sergeant. And then Tet Offensive occurred and they just shipped everybody over, right? He was in Vietnam for one day. He got blown up by a bamboo rocket. And the nurse, and then he was recovering at Walter Reed. And the nurse who was taking care of him, who he's never seen in his life, they ended up falling in love. And so they were driving out west after he got discharged. And she said, she was telling me this story. They stopped on the side of a mountain. Of course, he couldn't see it. And she said to him, well, Dan, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And he said, well, I was thinking I'd listen to books on tape. She said, And they headed off to University of Washington, and they both got PhDs in psychology and psychometrics. This guy learned how to do how to do matrix algebra when he was blind. Okay, can you imagine learning how to do matrix algebra when you were blind? Anyway,
I can't imagine doing it seeing.
Yeah. Anyway, the two of them eventually became some of the world's most renowned scientists in the area of measurement of PTSD, not treating PTSD, but understanding the different facets of PTSD. And they were colleagues of mine at Central Michigan University. Anyway, we used to go out and drink on Friday evenings. And I was saying something about my students, and he'd say, Bobby, you think these people are smarter than they really are. why don't you give them a little quiz? So I put together a little quiz, and I'll just give a couple examples. Who won the Vietnam War? Most 90% say the U.S. Well, that's the wrong answer. The right answer is probably nobody did. The second right answer is the North Vietnamese, but the definitely wrong answer is the U.S. Then the other one was, okay, what's the capital of Canada? 95% say Toronto, okay, when it's Ottawa. And it's like, okay, you guys don't even know that. And then it turns out that I read a study that like 30% of American students can't identify the United States on a map of the world. And so, like, a lot of them pick Australia because it seems to be just by itself with nothing else around it. Because every map that you have in the States doesn't, it's just got the U.S. there and nothing else, right?
Well, fortunately, United States kids look at a map, and unless the United States is broken up into little colored sections, they don't know. Like the rest of the world's all green, but the United States is purple and red, and
Anyway. So, Venus, I'll shut up now.
Oh, no, that's okay. You can carry on if you wanted. So it's actually pretty interesting listening. Okay. So, wow, where do I go from here? So, okay, so here's a quick question. So, with your research, are we thinking that COVID-19 came from bat eating? Or is that just a rumor that everyone's hearing? Just a myth. From eating a bat.
Oh, I think that's somebody's joke. But, here's the thing. You know what I did? If it didn't come from an accidental release in Wuhan from their bioweapons
so we're hinting at that.
I'm going to dismiss that one because I don't think the Chinese really wanted to take out as many, their own people, okay, to just test the spread of a virus. I'd be hoping they wouldn't. Is the whole issue is these wet markets. That's where you got all these different kinds of live animals that are all stacked on top of one another, and their feces drop down on their shit drops down on each other, and viruses come down on each other, and then the viruses mutate and they end up in the water that's in the middle of the market, and they mutate more, and eventually they jump species to something else, and then they jump species from that to humans, and then we're fucked. Can I say that word?
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I mean, now Z outlawed wet markets. We'll see how that goes, because the Chinese like to, they like to eat stuff that came from their wet markets, and somebody was the joke was on that meme kind of was on the internet that I saw it today or last night was and people said that only one person can't change the world, but what if that one person eats a bat? And I said, well, or an undercooked bat, but and then I posted it and somebody said, well, that's kind of racist. I said, no, it's not. I said, it's kind of humorous. I said, the whole point is, everybody's got so goddamn politically correct now that you can't tell a joke without offending somebody, okay? And I said, here's the deal, is people get all upset in North America because, like in Korea and Vietnam, they eat dogs and cats. I said, well, you know what? The Hindus get really upset that we eat cows. And I was in Thailand, and I'm sure I ate dog. And I don't care what other people eat. And you know what? Fish markets, fish aren't doing it. It's not fish. If you go to the wharf in San Francisco or in Halifax in Nova Scotia to buy fish, it's the same as a video that the Daily Caller just posted, about wet markets, except that they started out just focusing on a fish market. Well, fish don't do this, okay? And of course, you go to a fish market, they're chopping the heads off of fish, and there's blood and guts all over the place. Fish don't do this. And, so like when I was saying, I'm kind of in the middle, I I read from both the right and the left, and about as far right as I go is National Review and the Daily Caller, and about as far left as I go is the Toronto Star. So, which would be left of, for example, CNN. Okay, I don't pay. You know, I did a little research online, and because I saw somebody else had mentioned something like this, so I just wanted to see. And I listed all of the real news anchors from Fox News, and I listed all of the people who are, you know, bullshit, like entertainers like Geraldo and Hannity and Carlson and this sort of thing. People can't identify people like Chris Wallace, okay, who was a real journalist. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a problem. And I also posted something the other day. I said, well, you know, this is going to be Darwinism at its best. People who believe Trump are going to be more likely to die of COVID-19. So, you know what? I'm serious. It's true. If you believe this guy, you'll end up dying of COVID-19.
I mean, I personally am a Trump supporter, and it's not because I think he's the greatest president who ever lived or whatever. As I described when I voted for him in 2016, it's because I was picking the lesser of three evils. I didn't want a communist, and I sure as hell didn't want Hillary Clinton. I've already been through 2 terms of Clinton. I know what that's like.
2018 was a nightmare. I mean, it was. You're right. It was choosing the lesser of the evils, unfortunately, Trump didn't handle this very well. And if people pay attention to him, to what he's, you know, like he's been playing this down for. He was golfing when it was first, you know, it was what, January 19th or something? He was golfing and he didn't care. And then he got back, oh, we got 10 cases. We got this under control. You don't have to worry. And I'm going, this guy's gonna kill the United States. And so people need to listen to the health guys and stop listening to Trump right now, because he's still trying to downplay it. And it's a bad situation there.
Well, we should not be listening to politicians when it comes to medical stuff in the first place. Too many people rely on politicians. Like you can't trust politicians. They don't have a PhD. They don't study medicine. They're not credible. I want to ask you something quickly.
The medical doctors don't know anything either, because it's like my dad was an MD, okay? And MDs aren't scientists. Good MDs are good at diagnostic problem solving, and bad MDs are bad at diagnostic problem solving. I used to tell my dad he was an overpaid plumber. Good plumbers are good at diagnostic problem solving. Same with electricians, and bad ones aren't. So doctors aren't scientists, except if they're working in research hospitals like Johns Hopkins, University of Chicago, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'll shut up. Ask your question.
Okay, so this is my last question. We'll have to, and we'll carry on with our days. Okay, so the mutations of this COVID-19. So we have 8 mutations of this already going around the world and whatnot. I'm constantly getting into arguments with people on the internet, because of course people on Facebook know everything, right? Mm-hmm. Because they read it somewhere. And no matter where you read it, we're finding contradicting stories about everything everywhere. You know, like even one university will say something contradictory to another university study and blah, 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 blah. So we already have talk of a vaccination going around. And this vaccination, as far as some people are arguing, is that it's going to be a one-time vaccination to end all vaccinations. And then we have other people.
That will never happen.
Yeah, we have other people arguing that it's going to be like a yearly flu shot because it keeps mutating. So we already have the 8 mutations going around. So what would be your prediction about a vaccination?
Okay, well, first of all, from what I've read, Okay. And I'm no expert on how quickly you can develop vaccinations. But from what I've read is they're saying 18 months, right? But then once we have one, it's going to be like the flu, and it's going to be a crapshoot. The flu this year, the flu vaccine this year was about 60% effective, and that's damn good. Okay,
That is.
because they're just taking guesses when they're doing this. Usually in North America, we model it after Australia because they're just the other side of the world from us, and they get hit with the strain of the flu, and we kind of model it after them. But a few years ago, it was only 20% effective, right? And then when it's only 20% effective, a lot of old people die. And it's still better than nothing, it turns out, because it tends to reduce the symptoms in healthy people. And 20% is better than 0%, but 60% is a hell of a lot better than 20%. My advice is, don't listen to much. Be careful with what you read on the internet. I go to Health Canada and the CDC websites about 2 or 3 times a day. Interestingly enough, I had to correct the medical officer of health in Sudbury. And the way I did it was indirectly, because the medical officer of health in North Bay is a friend of mine. And I listened to the medical officer of health. This would be, for Americans, this would be the head of public health for a county or something, okay?
Okay.
And I said, I got in touch with him and I said, Penny Sutcliffe is spreading misinformation. And because the first cases that we had, there was in Northern Ontario, it was a guy who was at a conference in Toronto. Now, we know that this takes about 14 days. And he was back.
Incubation period.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was back in Sudbury 5 days after he was at the conference. And he said, she said, we've no problem. He couldn't have infected people at the conference. Well, that was just absolutely dead wrong based on what we know about the incubation period. So I got in touch with Jim Chirico, who's good. He's a good public health guy. And he got in touch with her and said, you need to revise what you said because you're misinforming the public. And, there's a fine line that there's a fine line here that you got to ride. It's a razor's edge in some sense. You don't want people panicking. And you also don't want people not to take this seriously. And so it is a fine line, right? And I think you're right, Venus, though, it's going to end up being a yearly thing once they develop a vaccine. I'm convinced they'll develop a vaccine. The virologists are very good at doing this kind of stuff. And it's not like it's just the people, it's virologists in the US, it's virologists around the entire world who are trying to develop this sort of thing. So.
I just have a couple quick questions that I was sitting on. I'll shoot them both at the same time, and it'll be the final questions I'll ask. The first thing you were talking back when with the wet markets and stuff, you were mentioning like animal feces and stuff, and it really brought into the mind like we talk about the COVID-19 infections, and of course the respiratory being the way that it's spread. We take it in. I don't want to use the term orally, but we breathe it in. That's how we get it. What about animals? Like, what is it about animals? Are they immune to it, or are they just susceptible and we should be?
I read something online today that said that dogs and cats are getting it, but I don't know if I believe it because I haven't seen the data. Okay, so I'm not convinced yet. Well, are you still there?
We're still here.
I just got an emergency alert on my phone about something about COVID-19, and I just dismissed it. So, but anyway,
checking my phone.
Anyway, I think I think if we follow the rules, we're going to be okay. I think it's the situation you're in where your boss has managed to get you guys back to work. I see that as being problematic. When Trump wanted to reboot the economy by Easter, I said that this is insane, because what would happen in the U.S. based on my reading of the data is that you'd have a peak, and then all of a sudden right after it, you'd have an immediate reinfection. Okay. Right. And that would be, obviously there's a trade-off between rebooting your economy and deaths, and the world can't function without trade, and the world, because it's global economy, right? China is the only country, maybe India, that's big enough that they could actually have an internal economy and survive. But the United States can't survive on an internal economy. It's too small. 337 million or whatever? You can't do it. And right now you're only trading with Canada and Mexico because the EU wants nothing to do with you. So what can I say? And there's only so much that, there are only, 338 million Canadians or so. I mean, there's a lot more Mexicans. So right. You're going to have to be selling your products. And now think about this, though, in terms of like the agriculture industry, where you have migrant workers coming in to pick stuff. We have the same thing going on in Canada. What the hell is going to happen with our crops?
Right.
One quick little thing about wet markets is we actually have wet markets in North America. We call them farms. And you know what? When those farms get infected with some kind of bird flu, we go in and we cull the entire farm. Well, I just got another warning on my phone. Something must be going on. Anyway, we cull the entire farm. So, it's not like you have a market with live chickens in downtown New York City, okay? And nor do we in Toronto, okay? So in North America, we do have wet markets. We just don't call them that.
I think it's fair to any open market would probably classify as a wet market. Like I'm thinking, being from Philly, I'm thinking of Fishtown, which we have the fish market, which is an open market. And again, we've had the conversation before about fish isn't the one that's pushing it, but I mean, it still kind of classifies what you're talking about in a sense of like we have the Italian markets down in South Philly. You've seen it in the Rocky movies. Rocky was running through them. Open stalls selling fruits and vegetables.
As an aside, I love Philly. Like, I mean, I lived in State College. I'd get to Philly a lot.
Thank you.
I still don't like cheesesteaks.
Oh,
but I've been at amazing Thai restaurants in Philly. We were doing consulting in New Jersey for Computer Science Corporation, which is one of the defense contractors. Yes, I have no morals. We would rather be in Philadelphia than Camden.
So do most people in New Jersey. That's why they closed the bridges. Right now, the quarantining areas, New York and New Jersey, they'll allow people, like say from the other states to come in. You can't leave. And I've learned that through my job, because we work all different areas. Not just Philadelphia. We work New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Maryland. We'll go to all those places, and we are actually banned from going into Jersey or New York because of the fact that we can't leave. They've actually since closed their borders.
Have you guys, either of you, watched this movie with Matt Damon and Morgan Freeman? I think it's called Contagion.
No.
Well, you should, because it's exactly what's going on right now. It's on Netflix or Crave or one of those. I can't believe they made this film, because it's virtually identical to what's going on now.
I know, it's almost like it's like predicted or planned maybe.
Yeah. The final question I'll toss in, so that way we can get this one over with, and I think it's a fitting final one for what we're talking about. Obviously Trump doesn't have it right, Trudeau doesn't have it right, the world doesn't have it right yet. in
South
your
Korea had it right.
experiences, who's that?
South Korea had it back. South Korea did the best job.
Okay, South Korea. In your professional opinion, with all the data that you've seen, all the things that you realistically, when do you think that the quarantines and the peak will finally reach for North America, for Canada and the United States? When do you think that most people could finally relax their guard enough to be able to return to some semblance of normal life, realistically?
Christmas.
6 or 8 weeks. 6 or 8 weeks would be my guess. But that presupposes that people adhere to the rules. Okay, that in that time frame, people are self-quarantining. And remember, quarantining is different than isolation. Isolation means you've tested positive and you can't go anywhere. Okay, right. Self-quarantining is like you kind of just are doing it on your own. And if people adhere to the rules, 6, 8 weeks would be my guess. If people don't adhere to the rules, never. So that's my bleak prediction.
Right.
That's a little bleak. I wouldn't say never, but I mean it will be longer, and that's the whole problem. This gets back to the issue of cats and dogs. You reminded me for something. It's like, pigs are way smarter than cats or dogs, and we're more than willing to eat pork. I see nothing wrong with eating cats and dogs as long as they don't come from a wet market.
I mean, for survival, yeah. I'm not someone who eats pork, so if I had to, for survival, I would eat pork. But on any given day, no thank you.
Yeah, well, my kid doesn't like it if I buy rabbit, So it's like I'm eating the Easter bunny.
I drive my mother-in-law nuts because I like venison. And me too.
That is so. Yes.
And I constantly bug her, like when I cook it up. She's like, "Oh, I can't stand the smell of it and everything." And I'm sitting down eating it, and I'm just like, "Don't worry, it's not Bambi's mom."
That's funny. Well, Venus, you're in an area where you must be able to get a lot of wild game.
Yeah, we have a meat shop around here, so we get venison, we get buffalo, we get lamb, we get a lot of nice stuff.
Yeah.
Got to start sending me some.
Amazing. Well, the borders are still open for mail, so that's good. So any last things to add to this? Or any last comments?
Jane, she doesn't. I sent Venus, because Venus is far younger than I am. I sent her the Dan Aykroyd point counterpoint this morning with Jane Curtin and with Jane, you ignorant slut, and I think she got a kick out of it.
Well, I think one of the big things. I think one of the big things is for our listeners. I guess one of the final points I'll bring up is Dr. Sinclair. Do you have any way for people to contact you? Maybe not directly. I'm not talking about like a phone number or anything, but like if they wanted to ask questions or get further information, do you have contacts?
They could email me unless I'm going to get overwhelmed. Bob.Sinclair. Bob.Sinclair 76@gmail.com.
Okay. So that way, guys, if you want to talk to Dr. Sinclair and maybe ask some questions that we didn't, you guys can find it. I'll make sure it's in the description down below of this episode.
They can also go to my LinkedIn link. I think I'm Robert Sinclair there, Dr. Robert Sinclair, blah blah blah, on LinkedIn. It's funny because when I was a professor, I told my students, "Don't call me doctor." I said, the part of the reason is I think that the people who are no good, who are useless scientists, are pretentious and they like to enforce this like distance between them and the students. And I always felt like, gee, it's better to have them feel kind of like they're on your level, you're on the same level, so they will actually ask you questions. And I would try my, I always said, look at when your mom told you there was no such thing as an ugly baby or a stupid question, she was wrong on both counts. But, I'd also point out that I'm very good at not embarrassing people when they ask stupid questions. Like, it might be going through my head. My God, that was a fucking stupid question. and I'll rephrase it so that it isn't a stupid question, so the student saves face, right?
Well, I appreciate you doing that for me today. So
nobody asked anything stupid today.
Thankfully. All right, then. Well, I guess that concludes our little bit of research information on the COVID-19. So we'll call this a wrap. You guys can find me on Facebook at Venus Chan. Instagram is Venus Uncensored. You can email me at venusuncensored@gmail.com. It's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And Chris?
Well, of course, you can find me right here for Realm of the Mist Entertainment on many of the different podcasts, including interview shows like Breaking the Fourth Wall. Co-hosting here, finally back with It Had to Be Said with Venus. And, of course, welcome back. Glad to have you back. And, of course, many other shows. In fact, later on in about 10 minutes, I will be on for After Hours. So, guys, make sure you're checking that out. And, of course, while you're there, like, share, comment, subscribe, check out all the other podcasts, and go over to our sister channel, Sounds Dicey Gaming, for all your tabletop and video game Let's Play needs. And if you prefer your podcast in audio-only format, no problem. We got you covered. Just look up Realm of the Mist Entertainment on Anchor.fm, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, or wherever quality podcasts can be heard.
Can you guys both send me the links to both of the sites, please?
Absolutely.
You got my email address, so send them along.
Absolutely. We could definitely do that.
And thank you very much for joining our podcast today,
It's
Dr.
been
Sinclair.
Oh, call me. Yeah, she's that's the first time she's ever called me that.
She's being professional for the camera.
Usually she's, Bob, you asshole. I can't believe you think this way.
I know me. Yes. I'm trying to like overcredit the show too much, I guess. We got an actual doctor here.
Well, what I think is funny, just to point off a little bit here. Normally, we're a lot more vocal and brash. I think we've been on our best behavior this episode. It's because we have an actual expert here. We're on our best behavior today.
I know we don't have time to make stupid remarks when there's actual science going off.
Like, wait, this guy can actually contradict us, and this guy can actually contradict us, and we can't prove him wrong. Let's behave.
Exactly.
Well, it's like I've always said, is like, opinions are like assholes. We all have them. They all stink. It's so when the data don't support your opinions, it's time to change your opinions.
Exactly.
That's where it's lived by right there in this day and age. But again, thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Sinclair. I had an absolute blast.
Call me Bob, damn it.
Bob, damn it, okay.
Bob, damn it. Bob's your uncle. There, see? All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your week till next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.